Good morning, dear students. In the previous video, I discussed introduction about Aristotle, and I discussed what is the plan of his poetics, how he made the chapterization. We discussed how many chapters were devoted to poetry, and how many chapters were devoted to tragedy, and how many chapters were devoted to epic poetry. And likewise, we saw some description regarding or some information regarding this poetics. Today's session, let me start the text. Let me share my text first. Students, Aristotle Poetics. In this, the first topic we are going to discuss is Aristotle's observations on poetry. He studies first the nature of poetry. Already we discussed that first 4 chapters and the 25th chapter are devoted to poetry. Poetry as a major form. Within the poetry there are other forms, sub-forms also, we can say. He studies first the nature of poetry. So, poetry being the art, literary art, he compares the poetry with other arts and he distinguishes it from them in the sense other arts. Further, he makes it clear what differentiates different forms of poetry. What is the thing that differentiates different forms of poetry? So, it is very clear, even in the forms of poetry, in the discussion of the forms of poetry, we can realize that all the forms may share some common similarities. At the same time, they may have some differences. What are those differences? And what are the main things based on which these differences may be identified? In that discussion, Aristotle makes note of the essential quality of each kind. He inquires into the structure of the plot as requisite to a good poem. So, poetics. In this poetics, Aristotle's observations on poetry, he compares poetry with its forms such as epic poems, tragedy, comedy, dithyramb, and the music and of the lyre. In most of their forms are all, in their general conception, modes of imitation. Students, understand this point. Poetry, a mode of imitation, and the music of flute and the lyre, the music of the lyre, also the modes of imitation. At the beginning, he compared poetry being literary art with the other arts, fine arts, that is the music. And in that music, he mentioned 2 instruments, music of the flute and music of the lyre. Lyre is an instrument, musical instrument. You know how this lyric came. In the first semester you studied what is this lyric. At the beginning, lyric was written to be just a companion or to accompany the music that may be or that is played by the lyre and a musical instrument. Later, this lyric became independent and the music was tried among the wisdomers. So, students, poetry with its forms He compared the poetry with the music of the flute and the music of the lyre. Both the poetry and the music, these two are the modes of imitation. So, not only this, even the painting, sculpture, dancing, these are all fine art. So, the arts differs from one another in three different aspects, children, in three different aspects. The first one is medium. Second one, the objects. And third one, the manner or mode of imitation. Here, the medium. Try to understand, in the music, there is the rhythm. In the poetry, there is the rhythm. Then, how can we differentiate these two? Simple thing, the language. Okay, here, try to understand, the arts differ from one another. The arts differ from one another in three different aspects: the medium, the objects, the manner or mode of imitation. What is that medium? Imitation is produced by rhythm, language, or harmony, either singly or combined. So, imitation, or of course, the loosely defined meaning for the word imitation is simply copying. The music of the flute and of the lyre, harmony and rhythm alone are employed. In dancing, rhythm alone is used without harmony. Rhythm, the repeated, well-organized pattern of vowels and consonants in the language, and the musical notes in the music. That is the rhythm. Then what is the harmony? The proper agreement or the balance. The balance between or among these the notes. So, the music of the flute and of the lyre, harmony and rhythm alone are employed. And in dancing, rhythm alone is used without harmony. Dancing imitates character, emotion, and action. So, in the dancing, we can find the characters are imitated, the emotions are imitated, and even the actions are imitated rhythmically. So, literary art imitates by means of language alone, and that either in prose or verse. So, our main concern, that is being the poetry, we can say poetry is the literary art. So, the literary art imitates by means of language alone. Okay, without having any company. That may be the company of the musical instrument or the company of any other symbols or other thing else, we can say. So, symbols means the small instruments which we use to make some sounds, which are made up of bronze. So, literary art imitates by means of language alone. In the literary art, we can find the language alone. And that literary art may be in the form of prose or in the form of verse. So, some arts employ all these means, namely rhythm, tune, and meter. In some cases, these all means are employed in combination, but in some cases separately, whatever it may be the case or condition. Such are the differences of the arts with respect to the medium of imitation. In this medium of imitation, we may understand that the rhythm, it involves the rhythm, tune, meter, rhyme. Okay, rhythm, harmony. That is the important thing here. Okay, so generally people do add the word maker or poet to the name, the meter. Okay, if anything that is composed in metrical composition, if a poem is in metrical composition, then we call the author of that metrical composition is poet or the maker. In such a way, we may speak of elegiac poets or epic poets as if it were not the imitation that makes the poet. Imitation that makes the poet. It is not the imitation that makes the poet, but the verse that entitles them all discriminately to the name. So, not by the imitation we are going to give the title poet, not by the matter of the imitation or the content of the imitation we have, but by the metrical composition we give the title poet. Even if it is so, when a treatise on medicine or natural science is brought out in verse form, customarily the name of the poet is by custom given to the author. Generally, we will give the name poet to that author. Poet is author, but all the authors may not be poets. But the author of the treatise on medicine is physicist, not poet. So, medium is not enough to distinguish poetry from other arts or other writings. We have to understand objects also. So, dear students, let's move to discuss what are the objects. So, in this medium we discussed rhythm, harmony, and the language, which are the mediums. Sometimes we may have 2 or 3 in the same composition. Now let us move to understand what are the objects. So already we know that the poet is an imitator. That's why the poet, being an imitator, like a painter or any other artist, imitates one of the 3 objects: things as they were or are, that is, they were in the past, they are in the present. So the poet may imitate the things they are or are. That means the present or past condition, actual condition. So second one, things as they are said or thought to be. Generally we may expect or we may feel that something is to be like this and something is to be like that. But here, things as they are said or thought to be. Here we can find that some things are commonly believed, how they are. So, third one, things as they ought to be. They are the real condition, and what are the people thought to be, that is a said or thought to be or commonly believed. And this third type is an idealistic view. When we see things, we may expect perfection in that. So that perfection is, we can say, the ideal. Of course, Plato also wrote the book, The Republic. In that Republic, he explained how the ideal democratic society should be. So, these are the three ways, three objects the poet, being an imitator, may imitate. In literary art, the objects of imitation are men in action, not a rock, not the place, or not any other animal or the thing. In the literary art, the objects of imitation are men in action, and these men must be either of a higher or lower type. From moral character point of view, moral character, goodness and badness. So the art imitates and represents men. Okay, in the earlier point, three imitations, three aspects of imitations in general, that is in general. But here in this process, we can say in the art imitates and represents men as better than in real life, as better than in real life, as they are or were in real life, as worse than in real life. Three cases here. In the literary art, the poet may imitates and represents the men in three ways. Well, the real life. So he may imitate the man better than in real life. The art imitates and represents men as better than in real life, as they are or were in real life, as worse than in real life. It is the same in painting also. This Polygnotus depicted men as nobler than they are. Caution depicted men more ignoble than they are. In the language, whether prose or verse, unaccompanied by music, there are different objects of imitation. So there are different objects of imitation. So Homer makes men better than they are. In the writings of the Homer, we can realize that Homer made the men better than they are. He attributed some noble character to the human beings. And Xenophon makes men as they are. Xenophon considered the men as they are. But Hesiod, the Thracian, makes men worse than they are. He considered the worst character, he made the men worse than in real life. Homer made the men better than in real life. This Xenophon, he considered the men as they were or are. So, the same distinction marks off the tragedy from the comedy. For comedy aims at representing men as worse, whereas tragedy as better than an actual life. So, try to understand first. Tragedy imitates a better life than the real life. Comedy imitates a worse character, or comedy represents a worse character of the man than the real life. Okay? And still, there is a third difference based on which we may differentiate other forms of literary art. There is still a third difference, the manner or mode of imitation, in which each of these objects may be imitated and narrated. narration, manner of the narration. The poet imitates by narration. The poet may directly reveal the expression, or he may use any character or thing to reveal the expression. So, the narration may be first person or third person narrative. Students, when you study the novel or the drama, you came to know whether the narration is in the first person or the third person. First person in the sense the author or the novelist or the dramatist directly speaks. But in the third person narrative, he may utilize a character to narrate all the story. Of course, based on this manner of narration, we can identify different forms of poetry. See, in ode, the poet directly expresses his grief for the loss of his dearest one, okay, or thickest one, we can say. So here, the same distinction marks out the tragedy from the calamity. Here, in the same manner, the poet imitates by narration. The poet may directly reveal the expression, or he may use any character or thing to reveal the expression. By using a thing or by using a character, he may reveal the story. So the narration may be first person or third person narrative. So there are three differences which distinguish different artistic imitations. From the above discussion, we can understand clearly that there are three differences or different aspects which distinguish different artistic imitations. There may be, with the help of these three, we can understand, we can make the distinction between poetry and other form of arts, and within the poetry, other form of poetry. So, under the title, his observations on poetry, let us discuss the nature of poetry. Students, before this Aristotle, there is a lot of argument regarding this poetry, or the usefulness of the poetry, or academic concern to the poetry. Actually, Plato, he avoided or he excluded the poets from his ideal society in his book Republic. So Plato called a poet an imitator and the poetic art an imitation. Okay, Plato called a poet an imitator because he imitates something. And the whole affair of composition of the poetry, that is a poetic art, an imitation. That's why he rejected. He thought that the poetic art is based on speculation. He said that there is a pleasure in imitation, but that pleasure spoils the hearts of the youth. So Aristotle considers the nature of the poetic art as an imitative. Aristotle also believed that there is a natural pleasure in imitation, which is an inborn instinct. So Aristotle also believed that there is a natural pleasure in imitation, which is an inborn instinct in man. It is imitative pleasure instinct. It is this pleasure in imitation that enables the child to learn his earliest lessons in speech. If you observe the children, they may be very enthusiastic to learn by imitation. They imitate the words of his mother. He imitates the words of grandparents and the neighbors. So whatever they listen, they may try to imitate, because there is some sort of pleasure in that imitation. So it is this pleasure in imitation that enables the child to learn his earliest lessons in speech. He imitates because he finds pleasure in doing so. A poet or an artist is just a grown-up child indulging in imitation of the pleasure it affords. Another natural instinct helping to make him a poet is the instinct for harmony and rhythm. The rhythm manifests itself in metrical composition. In the metrical composition, we can find the manifestation of the rhythm, because the meter is the pattern of rhythms. So the first instinct, that is the pleasure instinct in imitation, or that makes a man a poet. Another natural instinct, that is the instinct for harmony and rhythm. So the man enjoys harmony and rhythm. In that there is some sort of pleasure. That's why he accepts, or he likes, or he composed harmony. He composed the poem with the harmony and rhythm. Plato believed that poets' imitations are twice removed from reality. Of course, with that statement he rejected. But students, here try to understand. When you saw a flower, you may have some perception. When you saw that flower, because of the perception, some image may be imprinted in your mind. When you write something about that flower, then you may recap that imprint, what you had in your mind, and then you may reproduce. That's why Plato believed that it was removed twice from the reality. Once, when you perceive that image, the real thing, into your mind in the form of image, and another time when you reproduce the same image, or by making some modifications of the image in your mind. So this is how Plato believed that the poet's imitations are twice removed from reality. Aristotle rejects that false nature of the imitation. Plato's attribution was considered by Aristotle as the false nature of imitation. He attributed wrongly. That's why Aristotle feels that, he says that the imitations of poet are the recreations of a truth of universal kind. Recreation of a truth of universal kind. Poet is not simply reproducing, he is producing a truth, and moreover that truth is of universal kind. They reveal the truths of a permanent or universal kind. There is some sort of permanence. Okay, the poet already said that the rose is beautiful throughout the world. Whoever the people may speak of the flower, the beauty of the flower, they may speak, or they may say that the rose is beautiful. So, dear students, this is how Aristotle believes that these poets may recreate or reproduce a truth of universal kind from the sample, from the specific object. So, to the specific object, the poet is attributing universality. The poet is attributing universality. So, for Aristotle, it is not the function of the poet to relate what has happened, but what may happen. The poet may foresee the future. Okay, he may expect what may happen. Of course, the poet and the historian differs not by writing in verse or in prose. You may have a doubt. History, as it records the truth, you may feel that why should we consider the poetry? As there is the history which records the truths, why should we consider poetry? See, try to understand the real difference between the poet and the historian. The true difference is that the historian relates what has happened. The historian just can record what has happened, but the poet relates what may happen. The poet can guess what may happen. So, dear students, history records the deeds, but the poetry records the thoughts of the man. History records the deeds of the man, poetry records the thoughts of the man. So, the historian, the true difference is that the historian relates what has happened and the poet relates what may happen. Now, we call, of course, that's what may happen, that's what we may now call the law of probability. If you could imagine or if you could expect the future, that is based on the law of the probability now. Even the earlier or ancient times, the words already followed this law of probability. Okay, of course, that term may not be known to them. They know the idea. They practiced this law. Poetry is more philosophical. For Aristotle, poetry is more philosophical and a higher thing than history, because poetry tends to express the universal kind, whereas history the particular kind. Poetry is a more philosophical and higher thing than history, for poetry tends to express the universal, history the particular. Okay, so history can record the deeds of a particular person's related to a particular place or belong to a particular place. But in the poetry, we can find universal kinds. The pictures of the poetry are not mere reproductions of fact, as Plato believed. Plato believed that these pictures of the poetry are just mere reproductions of the fact. But Aristotle says that the pictures of the poetry are not mere reproductions of the facts, but truths embedded in those facts that apply to all places and all times. This is the meaning Aristotle gives to imitation. Okay, so Plato and others felt that imitation is just copying, but Aristotle felt that imitation is not just copying, it is a recreation of the truth of a universal kind. That is the meaning of the imitation for Aristotle. Okay, so Plato and others felt that imitation is just copying, but Aristotle felt that imitation is not just copying, it is a recreation of the truth of a universal kind. That is the meaning of the imitation for Aristotle. Now let's move to another point, that is its function, that is the function of poetry. Plato argued that the end of poetry and other arts should be the teaching of morality, or we can say to instruct. The end of the poetry is to be to instruct. But Aristotle argues that the end of poetry and other fine arts or other arts need not to be necessarily to instruct. End of poetry and other fine arts is the pleasure it gives. The pleasure it gives. It needs not to be teaching. The end of the poetry or the aim of the poetry or the aim of any other arts need not to be teaching. Aristotle strongly believes that there is a imitative pleasure in poetic art. The very two instincts, namely of imitation and harmony and rhythm. Already in the beginning discussions of this talk, we discussed that there is a pleasure in imitation. That is imitative pleasure instinct. Another one, instinct for harmony and rhythm. These two are involved in stimulating the pleasure. These two are involved in stimulating the pleasure. That's why the aim of the poetry should be pleasure. Need not to be necessarily to instruction. So poetry should be pleasing. Likewise, pleasing both to the poet and to the reader. If any poetry that serves two purposes, that are to please and to instruct, two purposes, that is to please and to instruct, then it can be superior kind to all other arts. So students, Plato argued that the purpose of is to instruct. The purpose of Aristotle felt that the purpose of poetry is to please. But if any poem that is composed to serve both purposes, that is to please and to instruct, then no doubt that is a superior kind of poem. And the next one is emotional appeal. Of course, Plato said that poetry, being a product of inspiration, affects the emotions rather than reason. Emotions rather than reason. These emotions and reasons are quite contradictory. With the emotions, we can't have reasons. When we want to have reason, we should not be influenced by the emotions. So, Plato said that poetry affects the emotions rather than reason, the hearts rather than the intellect. As the Plato believed that the end of the poetry is to instruct, he emphasizes intellectuality rather than the emotions of the heart. Like Plato, Aristotle sees that poetry makes an immediate appeal to the emotions, but he justified the emotional appeal of poetry. Aristotle justified the emotional appeal of poetry. Aristotle considers tragedy as the highest form of poetry. All other people earlier of this Aristotle, they believed that epic is the highest form of poetry. But Aristotle now considers tragedy as the highest form of poetry. Tragedy arouses the emotions of pity and fear. The emotions of pity and fear. Pity is aroused at the undeserved suffering of the hero. When we find the hero who is suffering unnecessarily, as he is undeserved for that suffering, then we feel pity. We may express ayyayo. Okay, fear is aroused at the worst that may befall him. Okay, before hero, in front of hero, if there is a worse thing that is a worse thing to happen, then they may feel fear. So these two, tragedy arouses the emotions of pity and fear. These two emotions. Then Plato considered these emotions, pity and fear, baneful to the healthy growth of mind. Like our human body, the physical body, our mind is also to be grown. That's why he says that Plato considered these emotions baneful to the healthy growth of mind. He says, if we let our own sense of pity grow strong by feeding upon the grief of others, it is not easy to restrain it in the case of our own suffering. Students, try to understand this point carefully. If we let our own sense of pity grow strong by feeding upon the grief of others, when the others have some grief, when the others are crying, then if we cry, we are allowing our sense of pity grow by crying. So, if we let our own sense of pity grow strong by feeding upon the grief of others, it is not easy to restrain it in case of our own suffering. So, if we feed the pity to grow upon others' sufferings, then when the sufferings comes to us, come to us, then we can't tolerate them. That is the opinion of Plato. But Aristotle has no such fear. He says, these emotions are aroused with a view to their purgation or catharsis. In the composition of literary art, these emotions are aroused. Okay, such tragic incidents may be created. Such tragic incidents which may arouse pity and fear in the hearts of the spectator or the viewer or the reader. These emotions are aroused with a view to their purgation or catharsis. So from this point we can understand that what is the purgation. Purgation means a release or relief from all the excess emotions of the heart. Relief from all the excess emotions of the heart. In tragedy, these emotions find a full and free outlet, relieving the soul of their excess. Relieving the soul of their excess. By relieving from our excess emotions, we are lifted out of our reserves and emerge nobler than before. See, when you feel sympathy, when you show pity to the character who suffered a lot from mothers-in-law or from in-laws family, in our real life, we can't suffer our in-laws. Okay, because already we came to know what may be the pain of that in-law who got the suffering from the in-laws family. Likewise, yes, children, he says that by relieving from our excess emotions, our heart may be lifted up. We can have our heart become lighter. Okay, our emotions may be released. Then we may become nobler than the earlier. because we experience the pain of others. For Aristotle, tragedy is an art that transmutes these disturbing emotions into what Milton calls the calm of mind. Dear students, in the society, in our life experience, in our real life experience, we may face, or we might have encountered many things or such tragic incidents. Our hearts are filled with such tragic incidents. Then when we are exposed to such tragic dramas, tragic poetry, where our emotions or our disturbing emotions transmuted into calmness of mind. For Aristotle, tragedy is an art that transmutes these disturbing emotions into what Milton calls the calm of mind. So, the emotional appeal of poetry is not harmful as Plato believed. Plato believed that the emotional appeal of poetry is harmful to the youth, harmful to the healthy growth of young mind. But Aristotle says that the emotional appeal of poetry is not harmful as Plato believed, but Aristotle says that it is health-giving and artistically satisfying. It is health-giving and artistically satisfying. So, dear students, this is Aristotle's observation on poetry. Dear students, in this lecture, we discussed how this Aristotle differentiated poetic art from other type of arts, literary art from other type of arts. And we came to know how he differentiated the forms of poetry among themselves. For that, he says there are three different aspects which may distinguish all these forms. One is medium, another one objects, and third one manner. That's what we discussed. And in this observations on poetry, we discussed three main points. That is the nature of poetry. Second one, the function of poetry. And third one is emotional appeal. In the nature of poetry, we came to know that it is imitative in nature. Okay, there are two instincts which make the poet. One is the pleasure instinct in the imitation. Another one, the instinct for harmony and rhythm. Okay, the function of poetry, as Plato believed that it should be to instruct or to teach. But Aristotle said that the purpose of poetry need not to be necessarily to teach, as the two instinct, the instinct of pleasure in imitation, or the instinct for harmony and rhythm, these two arouse the pleasure. That's why Aristotle says that the end of the poem should be to please the pleasure giver, and its emotional appeal. As the Plato feared that it is harmful, Aristotle rejected that idea. He said that it is not harmful. He said that it is a health giver because of the process of catharsis or purgation. So, in that purgation, all our emotions are released. Our excess emotions of the heart are released. So, the free outlet, full and free outlet of our emotion purgation. Thank you.